This is an RNZ podcast.
It is midweek Mediawatch o'clock. The great Colin Peacock joins me from the studio in Wellington. Hello, Colin.
Hi there. It's your glee in frustrating all these people that couldn't get the satisfaction of knowing the riddle.
Can I tell you, Cole, that I tried the riddles out on the people around the RNZ office today, and my boss, Ellie Ventura, got it today on the first clue. No one else had any idea what it was, and Ali said, "Is it?" And it was correct. And I give a chocolate bar to whoever gets it right first. And the sheer joy on her face, it was just wonderful. It was like, it's great to make people's day better sometimes, isn't it?
Well, you're making your boss happy with a gift, but you're mocking your own listeners for their lack of ability.
Well, someone's going to get it though. This is the thing. Someone listening is going to get it, and they're going to get a nice mug. Yeah.
You're mean.
All right. Okay, Mr. Mediawatch. Here we go. Okay, let's talk media. And, well, the first story, big story, this one, and kind of came out of the blue from my point of view. I don't know about you, these big, deep, sudden cuts at the Washington Post.
Yes, and it came out, I think, just after our session last week. So I think, Thursday or late Thursday, our time. Hundreds of employees laid off. The various descriptions, the numbers are a bit confusing. Sometimes they say a third of the company, these news stories. A lot of the figure commonly quoted 300, but that's from the newsroom, and that's a lot. Some American news outlets are big, but that's still a lot. And one of the biggest layoffs in American media history in one go, which kind of makes you think, the News Hub closure here was about that many people, most of them journalists. So, interesting comparison. But others are saying more recently that they've looked into these numbers, and that's the number of, I want to call them unionized staff journalists. Again, the terminology is a bit odd. There's a guild at the Washington Post that a lot of staff journalists belong to. They're saying, or the Atlantic writer Paul Farrap is saying, this could end up being closer to 44 or 47% of the total journalistic staff if you take people on other kinds of contracts.
Wow.
Wasn't handled all that well. The chief editor announced it, saying, sort of business talk about strategic resets to better position the publication for the future. But the controversial Brit, who was appointed as the CEO 2 years ago, Will Lewis, who came from Murdoch Land and News International and so on, he didn't take part in the announcement at all, then went to a kind of pre-Super Bowl event instead, and then he quit on Monday, a few days after the initial announcement, saying, effectively, my work is done, new chapters, everybody. So not good.
The Controversial Brit, incidentally, a great title for a memoir. Who and what was affected by these cuts, please?
Well, the sports section has been gutted, so I guess, in downsizing the organisation to save it, they've decided that's not a priority. Foreign affairs reporting, people all over the world, including Anna Fifield, laid off as Asia editor. She is a New Zealander who worked with Pulitzer Prize-winning teams at the Washington Post, came here to New Zealand, edited The Post here in Wellington for Stuff for a time. She has been laid off, among those posting messages saying it was a privilege to work with these excellent journalists. But people all over the world doing this. The people in the Ukraine, where they've been reporting and creating front page lead stories, they're all going. The Cairo bureau chief. So these are big, deep cuts. And across social media, one that didn't get immediately noticed was almost all of their professional photographers at the paper are being cut out. So, it's enormous.
Was this necessary? Was the paper in trouble, or does Jeff Bezos just hate the fourth estate?
Yeah, no, seems so. Bezos was the saviour of it when he bought it, $250 million US in 2013, invested a lot of money in it. But it was losing subscribers. Huge numbers deserted after the election, the US election, where, if you recall, he intervened to change the editorial policy such that a planned endorsement of Kamala Harris and the Democrats was not made. He then declared it would be more pro-free market and free speech in its opinions. And then since then, Trump won the election. He was amongst that phalanx of tech bros and media execs, courting Trump, paying for the inauguration, donating and praising him. And since then, the New York Times has kind of surged as a business while the Post has slumped. So they are at that point. But interestingly, I listened to a really good podcast about this with Eric Wemple. He's the New York Times media writer or a media writer there, but until 2 years ago he was at the Post covering media, and now writing about what he regards as
he got out at the right time. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. But here's what he said about the paper's problems on the Vox podcast called Channels.
The longer version of the answer is, well, we look carefully at what people want. We look carefully at what people are clicking on, carefully at, sort of what they're reading. And this, we are aligning the newsroom with what people really want. And so they got rid of essentially, or either got rid of or really reduced, scaled back the international coverage, the sports coverage, and the metro coverage.
I think that's such an interesting thing to say.
Yeah, because those things you'd think would all be, if you asked me to guess what would be important in the Washington Post, it would be that. Eric went on to say a whole lot of things like they failed to, there's a big market now in these websites like Axios, Politico, all digital native outlets. They're doing huge business because there's a lot. Their subscriptions for their pro services are really high.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money and lobbying and business, so these are really viable propositions, while, of course, advertising and traditional media and actually printed newspapers losing money. So that is, I think, where he says they've partly lost out.
Colin, can I ask you something? I'm putting you on the spot here a bit, but he was talking on that podcast about how, media businesses are giving people more of what they want. He's saying we're giving them more of what they want, more of what they are clicking on. Do you think there's a difference between what people want and what they click on?
Probably not. And that's one of the things Bezos did when he came in, because it wasn't on its knees at the time, but it wasn't doing well. So he did a bit of a turnaround and employed a lot of tech people who reinvigorated its website for a time. And for a while, it was working. There was the so-called Trump bump, which happened in a few media where people wanting to know and engaging with stories about Trump and the huge change that was happening when he was first elected in 2016. The Washington Post certainly profited from that. But when Eric said that, I think he was there kind of paraphrasing what he thought was the message of the Post's owners and bosses now to their own staff, saying, look, we've got to cut it back. We've got to shrivel this back to what we think people want, what the analytics tells us. But, people have responded to that, saying, well, the metro coverage thing, kind of important because Washington, a big city, and a
lot goes on there.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos is certainly getting the blame for this, and maybe optically it's not a great look for a super wealthy owner who got this for, $250 million is a lot of money, but it's probably less to Jeff Bezos than it is to you or I.
Yeah, well, other people have made the point that Bezos tried to keep Amazon a bit separate from the Washington Post, which is in itself probably not a bad thing. In fact, Bezos wasn't mentioned in any of the official communications or messages to staff on this, but if you wanted to sum up the attitude of like this mega wealthy guy who clearly could dip into his own pocket and save the paper and save jobs if he wanted to, David Remnick, editor of The New Yorker, in a piece called Democracy Dies in Broad Daylight, said Jeff Bezos has decided that one of his smaller properties, the Washington Post, has proved such a drag on his $230 billion fortune that prudence required that he obliterate much of its newsroom.
Tell us what you really think.
Yeah.
You talked before about Bezos, the images of Bezos and other tech bros cuddling up to Trump, and that this is, this has been blamed for the slump in their audience is this perception that Bezos is very sympathetic to the Trump administration. Do you think that's fair? Well,
that's a widely held perception that the paper tilted to Trump under him and those changes we mentioned, and after he won the 2024 election, Donald Trump. But Eric Wemple made the point on that podcast that I mentioned that the changes he demanded were an opinion. And Wemple says when he worked there, Bezos was, impressive and engaged and enthusiastic in those first years, and he says he didn't interfere in news. He said if that happens, journalists blab about it, and that didn't happen. And he described him as a kind of mezzanine owner, just kind of looking over the balcony and making sure everything was going fine. This is what he said about that.
The newsroom really, really, really roared, especially in the first Trump period. Marty was there, Marty Barron, legendary editor. The guy's a machine. He's like this news robot. He understands more about news and what everybody's published. He reads and reads and reads. He really harnessed Bezos' investment in a way that was really kind of historic.
So I think, to say that was a historic period, that's quite something to say about the paper that did, Watergate and the Pentagon Papers and all of that. But evidently it seems, this pragmatic response to the realities of life in Trump's USA has kind of overridden all that. But on that thing, like where Eric Wemple said he worked on that opinion side where Bezos did kind of intervene and as an owner, he said that's not that unusual in American media outlets. And he told the host of that podcast, Peter Kafka of Vox, that when he made those changes we talked about that tilted, the opinion to be pro-Trump, pro-free market, etc., that subscription desertion was so big and so sudden that at the time he wasn't even sure he believed the scale of it.
Hundreds of thousands, an astonishing number. I remember when I think it was David Folkenflik from NPR broke the number. Yeah. And every time I saw those numbers, I thought those numbers have to be wrong. David's a very good reporter, but he must have been misguided here. There's no way that many people turned off their subscriptions. It just doesn't happen.
Every one of us had the same reaction. And so I was waiting because I worked at the Post. I didn't know where he got this. This is magical. And I was thinking, okay, let's wait for the Post's denial. And it never came.
You're seeing reports too, Colin, that foreign staffers have had to crowdfund to get back home.
Yeah, I think there's two strands to that. So most of these bureau chiefs and staffers are saying, I'll be okay. I'm on a good contract. We'll be fine. It's their colleagues and stringers, employees that they feel.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So, for example, there was a journalist in Ukraine, Lizzie Johnson, said, "I've just been laid off in the middle of a war zone. I don't know how I'm going to wind up the operation here and get back." Her bureau chief, Siobhan O'Grady, posted messages during when staff knew something was up and a campaign to save the Post was underway before those huge cuts were announced. She put out messages saying, look, hey, Jeff, your wife visited us. She called us badasses and said, we'd be supported all the way, kind of putting pressure on like that. But also the Seoul bureau chief, who I think has also been laid off, she created a GoFundMe fundraiser to support the international employees and local staff who are laid off. So I think there's two fundraising. One is people who have donated because they want to that campaign to save the Post, and they want some of that to go to the journalists, although it's probably a bit late, to save their jobs. And this other one is to save the people who won't get the big payoffs and won't have these protections of belonging to the guild and do face logistical challenges, possibly even security risks, depending on where they live in the world.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of angles to this. I'd love to discuss some of them actually with you, maybe in the weeks hence. But 8.5 to 9, let's chat now. Wow. Jeff Bezos, a recurring theme in tonight's Midweek Mediawatch, Colin, because while hundreds of employees at the Washington Post have been sacked, the Amazon company that Jeff Bezos owns was indeed willing to pump tens of millions of dollars into a film about Melania Trump.
Yeah, that's right. And that point has been made by plenty of people. They pumped the money into the making, promotion and distribution of it. $35 million in a marketing splurge, ads in the NFL playoffs. They even they covered the exterior of that thing, the Sphere, in Las Vegas.
The Sphere. It's amazing, that thing. Really? Did they do that?
Yeah, they put a lot of promotion into it. The best summary of all the money spent on this comes from the Rest is Entertainment podcast. This was last week. Marina Hyde said, by her viewing of it, very little of the money ended up on the screen.
It reminds me of one of those aid programs, and they raise millions, and then someone goes a couple of years later to the area, and it's just totally desolate.
Yeah, hold on. You don't appear to have built that school.
Yeah. Did the kids get none of the money? Where did the money go? Okay. Now, obviously, Amazon would say that the $40 million is to license the documentary, but the effect of that is to, as you watch it, is to make you feel that you are watching something for which the only rational explanation at that price point is that it is a political bribe or a ludicrously lavish political gift.
Yeah, I think that's the best summary I've heard of where the millions of Bezos's Amazon money went.
There are a lot of summaries. The film reviewers are having a lot of fun as well. And I suppose, the media have had a lot of fun criticising this film. Lots of one-star reviews, lots of no-star reviews as well.
That's right. I mean, that was last week's story. So do I really need to say again, like Vanity Fair, all the money in the world can't make good propaganda. But director Brett Ratner is no Leni Riefenstahl. If you were making a movie that parodied...
Who wrote that? Is that Vanity Fair?
Yeah, Vanity Fair.
Gee,
if you were making a movie that parodied the current First Lady of the US, I'm not sure what you'd do differently. But the very best, you could go on and on endlessly, but the very best was from the Washington Post. Monica Hess, this was her stand first. If you suspect I have come here today to trash a movie about the wife of a notoriously thin-skinned anti-journalist president, which was bankrolled by the company owned by the man who pays my salary, not today, Satan. Do you think I'm a moron? Which I think actually stands as a review of the Washington Post under Jeff Bezos rather than Melania the movie.
Do we know anything about Monica Hess's employment currently?
I don't. I should check that out. See if she's still employed in the culture section.
All right, let's close to home. Let's head to RNZ. There is wow, this is great. There's this media tech concept called enshitification, whereby an impressive service rapidly becomes degraded and corrupted and disappointing to everybody, advertisers, users, etc. Indeed, some people might say that's happened at the Washington Post. Is the concept taking off a bit, Colin?
Well, you have talked to Cory Doctorow.
I sure have, yeah. I was looking through your notes.
Concept.
I know. I was looking through your notes. I was thinking, Colin, you're missing out on I had half an hour with Cory Doctorow.
I was sure I'd heard it or remembered it, and I went looking for it, couldn't find it. But anyway, this week, it's burst back into the consciousness. On Monday, here on RNZ. So First Up, a piece by Ross McNaughton.
Beattie points to the process of enshitification, a term coined by writer Cory Doctorow.
Which describes the degrading user experience of social media.
Yeah, so that was in a piece about analogue life, people ditching their digital devices and trying to go analogue. So he cited enshitification. And as if to prove the point, later in the same day, just hours later, this was on Afternoons, RNZ's explainer editor Nick Durga published a great piece, a kind of investigation about fake news AI slop that's flooding Facebook and scraping legit news stories like ones here at RNZ.
Awesome piece.
It was really good, and I think it's had the effect of that dodgy site now disappearing. I'll be doing more about this in Mediawatch on the weekend. But this is what he told Jesse Mulligan about it, Nick Durga, on Afternoons on Monday.
Facebook is really heading the same way, where it's the point where as they say, the enshitification of a lot of things is just ongoing. These platforms are degrading and allowing such sloppy content on there that you have to wonder, is the value going to be there at all anymore before too long?
So without even trying, I heard 2 enshitifications on RNZ on Monday. So I thought, could I go for the hat trick? And I looked around but found no more. However, in looking around, the Cory Doctorow, the author of enshitification himself, was on the New York Times Ezra Klein show for about an hour and a half. That was just last weekend, so just hours before RNZ's burst of enshitification, talking about the current state of play.
When they don't have to worry about competitors or regulators or their workforce or new market entry through interoperability, the same CEOs goes to the same giant switch on the wall in the C-suite marked enshitification, and they yank it as hard as they can, as they've done every day that they've shown up for work. And instead of being gummed up, it has been lubricated by an enshitogenic policy environment that allows it to go from 0 to 100 with one pull. And that's how we end up where we are today.
Enshitogenic.
We were getting at the derivations now. Enshitogenic. This is evolving, isn't it? But that was a great summary. But I think the funniest bit was when Cory Doctorow was asked specifically about Facebook and its founder. And when he was winding up, he was even more blunt.
Mark Zuckerberg arises from his sarcophagus and says, "Hearken unto me, brothers and sisters, for I've had a vision. I know I told you that the future would consist of arguing with your most racist uncle using this primitive text interface that I invented so I could non-consensually rate the ability of Harvard undergraduates. But actually, I'm going to transform you and everyone you love into a legless, sexless, low-polygon, heavily surveilled cartoon character so that I can imprison you in a virtual world I stole from a 25-year-old comedic dystopian cyberpunk novel that I call the Metaverse." And that's the final stage. That's the giant pile of shit.
All right. Yeah, that took me back, Colin. And I think Cory and I talked for about 40 minutes, and I think I got 3 questions in there.
He's energetic. Did you like my deployment of the censorship klaxon?
Excellent. Censorship klaxon, yes, thank you. A couple of minutes left. It's been a depressing midweek media watch so far, Colin, so let's end on something more upbeat and wholesome, like New Zealand winning medals at the Winter Olympics.
Yeah, we could do, but I could actually drag things back into the gutter by doing that, requiring more censorship klaxons.
Hey!
I I heard all these interviews with Zoe Sadowski-Synnott, who won the silver medal. They seem to me to be kind of identical, too long, not that interesting. I wanted to hear from her dad. Sean, do you recall back in 2022 she won gold at the Winter Olympics? He turned the air blue on News Hub at 6 Live. This is gold medal performance. Here it is.
How much has she sacrificed?
Well, the toilet blocked up this morning. Or yesterday morning.
And you reckon that was good?
I'm not going to tell you about that. She was crazy. She just went off the roof.
How proud are you right now? Your daughter's just become the first Kiwi to win a winter gold ever.
I'm pretty excited, to be honest.
Twice. Yeah, twice. Well, that was, I did play with time there a bit. That was a bit of deceptive editing there. But we did have fun with that on Mediawatch at the time. I think he got one of our Midweek Mediawatch annual awards even before your time, perhaps. But what I didn't realise was that Sean Synnott did that again when Zoe, his daughter, won at the Halbergs. And she didn't pick up a award. She sent her dad in her place to accept the award. And footage of that I have now unearthed shows that went pretty much how you might expect.
On behalf of Zoe, I would just like to say, what the she did say to us about 3 or 4 weeks ago, what the once again, Zoe, a speech.
Go on, Peacock. Thank you very much, as always.
No charge for that. Sorry, next week we'll try and lift the tone a bit.
We'll catch you next week. Thank you.